I've seen issues where one person who's got a strong opinion can change the whole tide at the local level. Probably one of the bigger challenges for local elected officials is to keep people engaged, even when things don't necessarily 100% go their way.
And so you look at the Wizards and the Capitals coming there, and
So you're gonna get me in trouble in the election year.
No.
That's a perfect question.
welcome to the Elected and Engaged podcast, where we talk to local officials who are the voice of local leadership. I'm your host, Mayor Derrick R, and today we're privileged to have my friend, Councilman John Chapman of Alexandria, Virginia, as our guest. Councilman John Chapman's road to becoming an elected official, it vividly illustrates the impact of deep-rooted community engagement and advocacy. He's a career educator. He took on the responsibilities of the Alexandria City Public School Board's Budget Advisory Committee. In addition to his education advocacy, he's a big history buff. He started his own company. It's called the Manumission Tour Company, which reflects that dedication for preserving and understanding and really teaching the history to people. He's been elected 4 times to the City of Alexandria Council. Whether you're an aspiring leader, an official, a community advocate ready to engage in your community, this conversation today with Councilman John Chapman is going to be one that's going to offer some valuable insights on how to be effective in your civic engagement, or even how to get elected on the local government level. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Mayor Wood. Thank you.
Good
Thank
to have
you.
you.
Always good to see you, brother.
Yes, sir,
Always.
man. So tell us, man, how it started, man. What inspired you to be just a leader and just somebody who wanted to serve your community?
No, I appreciate the question. I think for me, having grown up in Alexandria, knowing that I brought a different perspective as somebody who at that time was a young person in my 20s, had grown up in public housing in the city, had decided to make education a career. I knew that my particular perspective was unique. As our city has grown, there are less and less folks that are going to say that they're native Alexandrians, and there are also less people that are going to say they're multi-generational Alexandrians. I'm a fourth generation Alexandrian, and so not only is this my hometown, it's been my mother's hometown and my grandfather's hometown before that. And so making sure that I bring that expertise, that knowledge, the oral histories of the past and the understanding of what the city was during certain points in our history and to what it can be today. But I think as we look forward to how we change our community, how we change our region, I think we need to make sure certain perspectives are at the table. And I think that's what really caused me to run.
When did you know that you wanted to be engaged? Like, what was your pathway to even starting to be the youngest president of the NAACP for Alexandria?
So I think my call to service, just community service overall, really happened in college. I got involved with student government there, led a group of classmates in, I think it was for juniors at that time. We called it the lead team. And so we were leaders with our other classmates and trying to get them involved in the community, in the school, get them involved in service. And when I got home after college, after kind of getting my feet settled with a job, I looked for other things to do. And I found the Young Democrats. I found some of the other organizations within the city and just rolled up my sleeves and got to work, knowing that there's community service opportunities there. I also wanted to meet people, and I thought that was a good way to do that. And as I started to get more and more involved in the city, I noticed a lack of people that looked like me and that were my age in a number of various places, whether they were on boards, on commissions for the city. And so I felt that I needed to kind of break through and be in those spaces as well.
What was the biggest challenge you think you had to overcome to really get engaged? How did you know like where to start and how to get involved when you came back home?
I would say personally, for anybody that is looking to get engaged, you got to get over that fear of walking into a room and not knowing anybody, right? That first time you go to an organizational meeting or you attend a public hearing, and you don't know anybody in the room, that can be intimidating. And many people might do that the first time or maybe once or twice and then never come back. But sticking with it, gaining something from it, reaching out to people that you see are the decision makers or the people that might be able to give you some advice on how better to get involved. I think one of the big things for me as I started to get involved, I sought out kind of mentors, people to give me advice. And I think that was a huge help in getting me comfortable with being able to step into rooms.
Yeah, what was the best advice one of your early mentors gave you in really getting into that? Because I know mentors is like the fast pass, right? They've already made all the mistakes,
Oh, yeah.
they've already had all the troubles. What was some of the biggest lessons you got from your mentor that helped you
Yeah.
really make that decision too to decide to throw your hat in the ring and run for office?
Well, I'd say this, it's a couple of things. I think I had a mentor that is really good at networking, and he told me to kind of make it a game, right? If you're uncomfortable with the space that you're in, go up to at least two people in a room and tell them who you are, ask about them, and start to try to make that connection, regardless of whatever room you're in or whatever mindset you're in or whatever. At least meet two people in every space. I mean, there are folks that will go to a networking event and not meet a person,
Right.
and I think you do that and you start to get comfortable with approaching strangers, and telling them who you are, finding out about who they are, and trying to figure out what that connection is. That was one. And then I would say I had, and I still have, a mentor that um, kind of challenges me on how I give back, right? Making not just being out here trying to be a leader, do all this other stuff, but making sure that I'm actually giving back and making things better for the next generation. And his question to me is like, who are you mentoring? What are you doing as you grow, as you continue to look for mentorship? Make sure you're pulling somebody else up.
It's good. That's good. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, and probably I think the biggest motivation for this podcast is how can we bring up that next generation? How can we mentor them and give them a behind the scenes? Because we can't be everywhere at the same time.
That's right.
So
That's right.
now this gives us an avenue where we can really mentor and really speak to that generation of people who are coming behind us to do it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about now those organizations, Engage College, to all the things that led you up to deciding to run for office.
Yeah, so as I got back home and got involved with the Young Democrats, I also got involved with the Northern Virginia Urban League. They had a Young Professionals Network, and that allowed me to really focus in on kind of local politics. They had a director of political engagement, and we worked with her, somebody I think we know very well, Kezia Williams, and putting together a number of community events and forums about politics and local issues. Started to really hone my skills around what were some of the policy issues in our area, and how were they being addressed or not being addressed, and how were folks that look like me and my age having any input into the decisions that were being made. And I think that's really what pushed me eventually to get more involved in the politics of the party and things of that nature, but also be a better activist and work towards becoming the president of the NAACP. And I saw that organization, as it still is, kind of the leading organization for African Americans in terms of engagement, in terms of political strategy, in terms of policy and activism. So that kind of ended up being kind of a full circle moment where I got to be the head of the local branch and really put what I'd started out learning with the Urban League to work as an activist.
Wow. So somebody listening to this, define what a activist is, because people throw this word around
Yeah.
and they might not really understand. To Councilman John Chapman, what is an activist?
I would say it's somebody that is willing to spend time, energy, sometimes money as well, for a specific policy purpose. Not necessarily political purpose. I think we get caught up in that, but it's really the policy purpose. Like, what about housing policy do I not like, and what am I willing to do to change that? Um, what about transportation policy or access to food or what have you? I think our biggest thing at that time were two things: were housing and housing affordability, but also the quality of education for Black and Brown kids. We focused in on some specific programs that we wanted to see within our local public school. Met with the superintendent, met with his deputies, talked to parents, and tried to get energy going for a particular set of programs. On the housing side, I think we focused in on working with staff to kind of elaborate on policy positions that we wanted to see about affordability, about how many set aside units were being created by the city, where was local funding coming from. And so working with not only city staff, but local officials on housing policy was part of that activism.
So then transitioning, because you've got an extensive, and I think this is good because people don't know sometimes how engaged somebody was in the community before they started campaigning from office.
Yeah.
I mean, yours started in college,
Yeah.
right? From the student body, right? The Student
Mhm.
Government Association, SGA, and
Yep.
to the Urban League,
Mhm.
to the NAACP, to having several mentors,
Yeah.
right? So now it looks like you got about a decade of just engaging
Mhm.
in advocacy work, in policy change,
Yep.
in all of that work. What led you now to say John needs to throw his hat into the ring and start campaigning? And what was that campaigning process like?
Yeah. No, I think the turning point for me was, as I kind of started earlier, talking about the fact that I thought my perspective was missing from elected office, particularly in Alexandria. We had a former council member run for delegate and be successful as a delegate, but he was at that time one of the leading voices for education in the city. And not having him as an education voice on council, I think, would have hurt council a lot. And so I decided to throw my hat in there, knowing that I had a background in education, fill that space. It wasn't about kind of running to make a name for myself, but I really saw an opportunity to provide that specific kind of educational leadership on council, and also talk about one of my pet issues, which was housing affordability, because at that time it really didn't have enough champions on city council here in the city. And so being able to kind of hone in on those two major issues as kind of the what I could, not only what I liked, but also what I could do in terms of bringing to the table some solutions, really kind of propelled me to want to run. Campaigning process is always grueling, as you know. Um, and I think for me, it wasn't as hard when I first started out because I had also been working every once in a while as somebody's campaign manager. I'd run a number of campaigns in the city. And so the process of campaigning was not one that was foreign. It was not one that I necessarily had to learn. I think you can always grow and learn more, but I wasn't starting from scratch. And so I think that made it easier for me to run my campaign, raise money, knock on doors, things of that nature. And so I was lucky enough to be placed in the primary, the sixth in the primary actually, by I think about 400 votes. And then in the general election, I think ended up placing third
Okay.
out of the six candidates. So yeah, that's what made it happen.
Wow. So what do you think about the jump from now you go from being a advocate, right? As
Mhm.
somebody who wanted
Yeah.
to advocate for policy change to campaigning to now you get elected, right? And what year was this you got
It's
elected?
2012.
2012. I think we got elected together.
You
We were on
did.
the bottom
That's right.
of a guy who carried the top of the ticket.
That's
His
right.
name was Barack Obama, right?
Absolutely.
We're some of the last ones to get elected with
That's
Barack
right.
Obama, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were on the ballots. Like, so how is it now going from advocacy for policy change to now you go from campaigning to now you're elected. Now you got to become a policy maker. What was
Absolutely.
that? What
No.
was the, because I know the lens, and a lot of people don't know this, right? But what is the difference in the looks from being on one side to the other side? Like you come in, you got all these ideas, you want change to happen.
Yeah.
Right now, you think people should do it. What was the biggest adjustment for you?
As you know, it's about the reality of what's possible, right, and the constraints that um, certain certain policies are already under, certain industries are already under that you don't have to take into account as an activist. That's not necessarily your job. Like you're providing the push, the motivation to get things done, get things through. When you're a policymaker, you got to make sure everything works, right? You could put a policy to improve something, but you don't want that improvement to be temporary. You want that to be long lasting, and so you need to make sure your policies align with what the reality is and they're sustainable. I think one of the biggest eye openers for me was about some of the affordable housing uh, policies that I wanted to put in place. Um, you know, some of those policies have to be backed by funding, and there needs to be funding available. And if you want to put in a policy that does not have funding that's behind it, it's not going to be sustainable. And I think one of my first kind of eye openers was that, I had a council member challenge a policy that I wanted to put in place, and they were like, "How are you going to fund that?" And that's the part that I haven't really kind of thought through because I'd said, we can do X, Y, and Z and make this happen, but oh, there's no money to do that, or where are you going to get the money from? And not just the money the first year, but year number 5. If you want to have folks within subsidized units or something like that, there might be money right here in this budget, but how can you make sure that same money is available in a decade or two? Because you don't want to provide somebody with a house for 1 year. That's not what it's about. It's just a sustained effort, and so making sure that your policies align with reality. Um, and also, I think it's about also finding partners. I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from being an activist is you can't go at everything alone. It can't be just one organization. It's got to be more people um, that believe in your idea, believe in your policy push, believe in your advocacy. Not only because it's more people make a provide more momentum and more push, but because you are consistently having to talk about that policy to others and engage them and convince them. And maybe sometimes you're going to have to uh, discuss what matters to them as part of what you're trying to do as well. And I think from a policymaker standpoint, you come to understand that fully, very, very well. Um, any policy that you put in is going to have ramifications for different types of people. And so understanding those different types of ramifications and being able to adjust policy to make sure you are doing what's best for everybody is usually the case that we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say even though you elected, you still had more people you needed to get engaged
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
challenges.
Yeah, that never stops. It never stops.
Yeah, talk about what are some of the challenges you see being elected 4 times in the city of Alexandria. What are some of the challenges you see now in trying to get people engagement, and what are some of the things you've done to be successfully to keep your community engaged in the process? So some of the challenges
Yeah.
and what has been successful.
I mean, I think the one of the biggest challenges is there's so many. I don't want to call them distractions, but I think is probably the perfect word for them. Um, most most voters, most constituents are focused on their life, right? They've got their job they got to deal with. They might have family. They might have health concerns. They might have a whole host of things. And you're over here as government saying, "Hey, we want you to be engaged." But what does that mean for them? How do we do that? How do we make that the easiest thing for them? And how do they get engaged and feel like the time and energy they're spending is useful? Right? Because if they get engaged on an issue and they want that issue to go left, but it goes right, now they're going to feel deflated that their time and energy was not used and it wasn't worth it to be engaged. And I think that's always a challenge. Probably one of the bigger challenges for local elected officials is to keep people engaged, even when things don't necessarily 100% go their way. Um, and also explain to folks why things are going or not going the way they may be going at that time, right? As you and I both know, housing policy is not solved in 1 year or one term. right? And so it's about consistent changes to policy as we evolve, as our communities evolve, making sure we do that. And that's not always the most exciting thing for our constituents to learn, to know, and to understand, because like any of us, we want results quick, and we want them to be done after they're done, right? If I've put up this building and put people in it at affordable market rate prices, I want that to stay the same even if the market changes, right? And so how do we evolve to get good outcomes with affordability as our markets evolve?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think you led that whole conversation off talking about the distractions of people,
Mhm.
right? How important when you look at local government, and how do you compare it to state government and federal government
Yeah.
when you're talking to the majority of the people? Like, where do you see those levels of government, and why is local government important to you?
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
local government, we are, we're the closest to the people. We're the most, we have the most effect on people's daily lives, right? Federal government doesn't get involved if your trash doesn't get picked up.
That's a fact.
Um, let's be honest, federal government's not widely involved if your roads are in disrepair. The state might be a little bit involved, but not that much. Your local government is repairing the roads. They're picking up the trash. They're building the schools. They're employing city staff that are going to help you with whatever local issue that you have. I find that, the state folks and even the federal folks are more of funders than kind of roll up your sleeve and get stuff done at the local level type of problems. Um, and so I would say, the the way you work and way you deal with the state level and the federal level is a little different. It usually does take groups of people lobbying the state to get something done, or the federal folks to get something done. I've seen issues where one person who's got a strong opinion can change the whole tide at the local level, right? Um, Not to say that that can't be done at the state level. I think it's just a higher bar and particular issues. Um, but you have so much more of an impact at the local level by just reaching out to a local elected official and saying, hello, I care about this, or I want to see X, Y, and Z, than you do at the state and federal level.
What role do you think partisan politics plays in the local government?
I think it does have a role. I find, and I'm in campaign season now, and we'll probably have at least one Republican candidate for council, and I've had some in the past that have said, it doesn't matter at the local level if you're Democrat or Republican. You know, uh, Trash is still going to be picked up, roads are still going to be done, kids are still going to be educated, and while that outcome might be the same, the way it gets done is different, right? You might have uh, union workers working on the trash truck, or a teachers union making sure teachers are employed and paid uh, with a kind of more democratic or progressive leadership, whereas you might have contractors doing all the work for the lowest bid in a local level if you have some of the other folks that want to be on council. And so and that plays a real role when we start to talk about work, we talk about wages, we talk about people actually having the ability to be able to control their lives with, and not have work control their lives, right? I think we take that for granted sometimes, but we all are working for a specific reason, not wanting to be kind of slaves to our work. We want to make sure work has good outcomes so that we can have good outcomes in life, whether it's financial independence, whether it's being able to take care of your family. And I think some of the progressive uh, policies start to do that, because we're starting to talk about the cost of everything. We're talking about wages. We're
Mhm.
talking about what it means to have some type of independence at work, and be able to have some input on policies at work as well. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, one of the things I see, with that, because of the partisan on the federal level,
Mhm.
it does create a bigger distraction where local government doesn't get a big TV spin or a big news spin as local government. You know, what do you find the challenges of not getting that marketing or that eyeballs on local government? Do you feel like that hinders the engagement or the work that gets done on the local government?
I think I don't know if it hinders it. I think it makes it less accessible to people, right? If um, you have a 24-hour news cycle and 23 of it is about stuff at the national or federal level or even state level as well. But, only an hour is at the local level. I think that easily can garner people's attention easier than anything at the local level. I think we continue to struggle and continue to be creative around how we are going to reach out to people, informing them of, you know, something as such as trash days changed for this week, right? Or this festival's coming up, or this planning project for your neighborhood is coming up. That's not going to be on Fox News. They're going to catch the kind of spicy stories, right? And so I think local government does have that issue, that burden, that hurdle to really try to reach through the noise and reach out to individuals.
It's good. And speaking of the 1 hour out of the 23 hours, I mean, recently Alexandria made big news because, and I don't know if this was a big loss in your feather or a big win, but you all were in the news because of two teams from Washington D.C. were looking to come and develop
Yeah.
in a site that particularly the Washington Commanders could have been in years ago, the same thing. And so you look at the Wizards and the Capitals coming there, and what role did media play or not play in the information or misinformation? And I mean, because this is important for when people get engaged in knowing like how information is disseminated from a local government standpoint.
So you're gonna get me in trouble in the election year.
No.
Let me know that. No, that's a perfect question. I actually had an interesting conversation with some constituents yesterday about it. Right, the allure of that story um, was tremendous. Anytime a sports franchise moves around or does something, it catches national attention, frankly. And so you had all eyes and ears. You had reporters reaching out to us that had never talked to me in, a decade on city council. Hey, can we get a story? Can I get you to come over here and chat, 5 seconds about what's going on, or, whatever. And there were a lot of quick, fast stories that came out when no information had really been solidified, or even some of the information was barely even contemplated. And so one of the things that I did let community members know is that at a certain point in this process, and I can't remember how many months now this process has been going on, but within the 3 or 4 months since a public announcement about a framework plan coming forward, we had people that were like, "Oh, this is a done deal." No, 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 not at all. You had media saying it was a done deal, right? All you had from the combination of local government, the governor, and Monumental was an announcement that we have a framework that we're going to try to work through to see if this is viable and possible. There are a lot of pieces to it, some financials that are still being worked on. But what you heard in the media was like, this is happening. They're moving to Alexandria. They're done. It's done. It's a done deal. We're like, hold on, nah, not at all. We got a lot of hurdles. And as I think everybody started to find out, there were a lot of hurdles, and a lot of hurdles weren't even in Alexandria.
Right.
There was a lot of work to be done in Richmond.
Yeah.
And as you know, that's kind of where everything died. But I think that showed the challenge that I think local government has, because we put together a number of opportunities for the community to engage as a council. Not, and I want to be very clear. As you know, it's one thing for your locality to come out with information, engagement opportunities. And it's a whole nother thing for you as an elected official to say, hey, I want to do my own thing and come out with these opportunities for people to engage me, good or bad, political or not. Um, and we decided as a council, hey, it is in our best interest as a city for us to be unified in coming out and how we talk to the community, regardless of how we feel about the project or not. The engagement piece can't be a political thing. Can't be, hey, I'm running for office, and so I've got to do these 8 sessions. No, we've got to have certain sessions by the city that we attend, that we support, that we drive people to be able to get our city local government message out about what this is and the impact, good and bad, challenge or not, that this can have. And I think we had to really dig in our heels with some folks in the media because they wanted to drive a message at a certain speed, and our message was at a different speed and a different tone, and unfortunately sometimes in a different language, just to say, hey, these are folks that we need to communicate with. We need them to understand what is possibly coming, if it's possibly coming, and what their opportunities to engage and have input are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that's a good. Would you consider that a win or a loss for you at this point?
For me, it's, everything is a learning
There
experience,
you go.
right?
Yeah.
I take back a lot of lessons from this process, and I think that's why, at the end of the day, I encouraged it. I was excited to get that type of attention from an organization that big, right?
Yeah.
We are a small city of 155,000. You know, we're not going to attract, franchises from across the nation. And so this is, for us, what the second time in what several decades that Alexandria's attracted this level of attention from a sports franchise. And so I do think it is a good lesson for us, a lesson for our community. We get firm understanding of, some of the things we can do, some of the things we can't do, some of the challenges of different parts of our community, particularly that Route 1 corridor and what that looks like. I think we also get the chance and opportunity to talk about what we need that place in that area to look like. What's it going to take for transportation to not be an issue in that neighborhood? How much money is that going to take? I think we actually got to talk about that. And how many millions of dollars would we need from the state or corporate partners to be able to make something work there? We got to talk about, what do we want to see next to our metro stations? That's been an ongoing question and challenge in Alexandria for decades. We have some of the most underutilized land around our metro stations. You look at Arlington, decades ago, they made the decision to put their metro stations underground and were able to develop high density, quality neighborhoods on top of them. And we've not been able to use the land around our metros to really evolve economic development in that same way. And so, this was a possible opportunity to change that for that one particular area.
That's good. I like the perspective of lessons learned.
Mhm.
What would be a victory you'll share as an elected official, or something that
Yeah.
you felt like that just really, I got elected for this reason, and I was able to accomplish something I actually wanted to get elected for, type of situation.
Just saying, I want to answer it a different way. I think
Okay.
one of the biggest feathers in my cap was something that I honestly never talked about when I was running for office. And I took the kind of a conversation I had with one of my mentors, former Mayor Bill Ewell, and we were talking about, this was after he had gotten out of office, and we were talking about what is one of the things that you wish you had accomplished. And one of the things that he talked about was stormwater and sewer infrastructure. And the conversation was, a brief one, but it was like, I wish I'd have done that. It's not sexy work,
Yeah.
right? It's very expensive. You might not have a lot of friends doing it, but it's so necessary, particularly in our city, being an older city, as you know,
Flooding. Yeah.
right? And that was before some of the bigger flooding challenges that we've seen more recently. And so, having seen those flooding challenges, having had that conversation, I had a number of conversations with community members to put together. a ad hoc at that time stormwater uh, implementation group. This was a group of residents that had some that had experience in that industry with stormwater, with capacity, with infrastructure, and sit them down at the same table with city staff that were doing projects. And questioning, we were very upfront with everybody. Everybody was on the same page to talk about the challenge of funding projects, the challenge of timing for projects, and how they would line up to be able to deal with possible flooding issues, right? And so, prior to this, we had just had staff working on that, very little kind of direct community engagement in this. And so as we started to get involved in this, you had some tough conversations with staff. Hey, why are we spending the money we're spending? How is it working for the community? What's being done? And so as we get to that, we start to make a path on how things get done, how they're funded. And, we get a commitment from the community and staff around the funding levels. We also get projects done, so we have a lot less flooding than we did back then, and we end up making this a regular committee that's going to meet until all the projects are done in the city, and that's probably going to be some decades from now. But it's going to be an ongoing opportunity for direct community engagement with probably one of the largest expenditures that we have as a local government. And I'm quite proud of that because it pulls our community members behind the veil so that they can see how things are being funded, how they're being implemented, and question and challenge those.
So you're getting other people engaged in the process. That's
Hmm.
good. An open and accessible local government.
Absolutely.
What's your vision going forward as an elected? What motivates you to continue to seek reelection? What motivates John Chapman?
I mean, it's the fact that the job's not done. I think, with housing, you need somebody that continues to beat the drum for affordability. Is not scared to be creative about funding. Is not scared to challenge some of the norms that we have. Sometimes I get in trouble for that, but that's part of it. And I also, at this point, like you kind of said, there aren't a lot of elected officials that have been around as long as us. And so that also drives me to make sure that the community memory remains somewhat long, right? I can say I'm probably one of the only people that's running for reelection that fully remembers what Alexandria Waterfront used to be before we passed the plan to change it. I remember what Potomac Yards looks like prior to a strip mall on it and homes and condos and things like that, right? And so having grown up there, I've seen a lot, and as you said, got involved early, and so having the tenure, the background of the community, and wanting to make sure that as new folks get involved, we keep an understanding of where we've been, so we're not kind of retreading our footsteps. We're actually moving forward with an understanding of where we've been.
That's good. What advice would you give to people now who are contemplating running for office on the local level, whether it's school board, whether it's city council, whether it's whatever, the local water authority, or
Yeah.
get involved in boards and commissions? What advice would you give to that person that's watching this who wants to get elected?
A couple things. Find a mentor. As we've talked about, the power of mentorship is huge. Be solution focused. I mean, as you know, one of the worst things to have is have a colleague that's not solution focused. They're here to play political games. We see at the federal level, we see how detrimental that can be to forward movement. And at the local level, you don't have, again, like you said, you don't have the eyes, you don't have the attention, and so the times that you get to be effective are smaller. And so because they're smaller, you need to make sure that you are solution based. You need to make sure people around you are solution focused, because you have to deal with the real world issues that folks have. If you're not solution based about affordability of housing, in a couple years, there's not going to be housing left in your area. If you're not solution based about how we fix roads, roads are going to get worse. If you're not solution based about schools, you're going to have capacity problems or not quality education. Is not going to exist in your locality. And so, as you run for these things, be very focused on what the problems are, but also understand that you need to come with some solutions as well.
Well, that's wisdom, boy. You've been in this seat for a while.
Man, I tell you.
You know what I'm saying? As you look back over, like, what do you think the like looking back at, 2012, getting elected to now, like what is, that experience coming in there to being where you are now? What do you think the biggest thing you've learned and gleaned over the last decade? Do you go back and look at like some of the old council meetings and some of the old clips and
Man. Ooh.
say, who is that guy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I learn and continue to learn is two things. Continue to read about what everyone else is doing, understanding best practices in any industry, any issue, any problem you face. Understand that you are not alone in facing some of the issues that you face at a local level, on a school board, even at the state level. There are other folks that are looking at issues, and to know and understand the issue and know and understand the different options and opportunities you have, I think better equips you to figure out what's best for your community. Um, and I would also say, being able to make relationships. I mean, making relationships I think is huge in politics, whether you're making relationships within your governmental body, whether you're talking to staff, whether you're making relationships with other elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a powerful thing because, again, you're not alone. So being able to lean on people, talk to people, helps figure out things that you wouldn't be able to figure out by yourself. And I think we are, and sometimes it seems that we are moving towards a place where people don't necessarily trust talking to each other. And everyone is in competition. Right. And as you know, at the local level, that's not always good. You need to be working as teams. You don't have to all believe the same thing, but you need to be working towards an outcome and being able to communicate towards an outcome.
That's good. That's good. Now, somebody's watching this. They ain't never been engaged. They ain't never been elected. What can that person do now to get engaged in local government? What would you say to that person who might have just came across a soundbite or something, about getting engaged in the power of local government?
Yeah, especially with local government, reach out to a local elected official and ask for, 15 to 30 minutes of phone time with them, phone conversation. Hey, I want to talk to you about whatever I choose to talk to you about. Every elected official should be humble enough to do that. So reach out to them, ask them for some time to talk, and share your feelings about things. Ask them some questions about what's going on in the community. Ask them how they think you should get involved, and how can they help you with that. I think those are, first steps for all of us, and really good first steps for most of us.
Listen, John, you've been a great guest today. What other advice, anything we left out you want to share as we close out, give the people some inspiration or some words, some Johnisms. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know about Johnisms.
we just made that up.
No, you're fine. A couple things, right? I don't think we all continue to recognize, or it's always sometimes morbid to realize that we have one shot at this. We all have one life. And tomorrow's not promised, right? And so spending your time helping your community grow and be a better place is the best use of time that you can ever have. Whether you're helping someone, whether you're helping a group of people, whether you're helping an organization, you will never regret trying to better people in your community. And so for anybody that's out there that is, sitting down playing the video games or whatever, I mean, there's an opportunity for you to go out and be involved. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we didn't talk about this part, but that's kind of what changed me. I used to be a video gamer playing games all the time, but that call to service, that need to help someone, is kind of what got me started on this path.
Wow. What's next?
Election.
Election.
You know, I don't look too far in advance. We've got an election in June, a primary in June, so I've got to be focused on that. After that, we've got the November election, and hopefully getting back on council, working with everybody that comes on board and moving Alexandria forward. I think I put out to the community that we need to have an economic summit. The last time we had one was in 2007. And a lot, as you know, has changed since 2007. So how we reorient ourselves as a city that is supportive of business and wants to make sure that big and small businesses thrive in the city. We need to talk about how we do that and support them as a community.
How can people get in contact with you?
You can always shoot an email to me, john.chapman@alexandriava.gov. Of course, I've got a website, chapmanforcouncil.com. You can find me, of course, on social media. Chapman for Council is a handle for Twitter, Facebook, all the Instagram, all the things, right?
There it is. Councilman John Chapman, City of Alexandria, who is also a sister city to the town of Dumfries, which I mayor over. It's been a great episode of the Elected and Engaged podcast. We are your voice of local leadership. Make sure you share this episode, you subscribe, you tag a friend who needs to be not only engaged, but possibly be elected in local government. We'll see you next week.